Hello everyone and welcome back to this course on implementing high availability solutions with Windows Server 2019. We are in section 5 of the course, and in this video we are going to demonstrate on how to implement a hyperconverged S2D cluster. So let's get on to the lab and get started. Okay, we're here on our management machine, and first of all, let me bring up Server Manager to show you that I've already added these 4 machines into Server Manager, and these are the IP configurations I've done so far on them. Now, before we start implementing our cluster, you need to know that there are some prerequisites that you need to configure or install on your machines, and I'll show you exactly what I've done so far, and we can do this again by leveraging partial remoting. So what you need to do basically is use the invoke command on all of your 4 servers, and the script block would be to install the Windows feature, and the roles and the features will be failover clustering, file services, and Hyper-V. Include all sub-features and all management tools, and this will require a restart of all the computers. Now, I've already done this on the servers, I've already restarted them, so let's go further into our process. And the first thing we need to do is to make sure that all those disks we have added to the VMs to our servers are online and showing up properly. So in order to do that, we again go to PowerShell and use again the invoke command. So I want to do this on all of my servers. So S2D1, S2D2, S2D3, and S2D4. And this is going to be simple. We need to leverage the get disk command. So the script block will be get disk and format table. Now, we need to leave this command to run, and the output should be information about our disks, of course. Now, as you can see here, all the disks are showing up as healthy and online. On each machine, I have 6 SATA disks, 6 1 terabyte disks, and the 60 gig basically operating system disks. One other thing to mention is you can see here the serial number of the disks, right? This basically corresponds to that SATA channel that we have configured. And again, this SATA channel needs to be different on each disks across all the machines. And as you can see here, it is just like that. Okay, the next step in our process is again to validate the cluster configuration, and I am going to show you how to do it from PowerShell. We did it in our previous cluster in the GUI, but I want to show you how to do it from PowerShell. So let me just clear the screen here, and the command that you use to accomplish this is test cluster. You need to specify the nodes, so the nodes will be S2D1, S2D2, S2D3, and S2D4. Okay, now we need to include several other parameters because we are not going to be running all the validation tests, because as you may have figured out, we don't have yet the storage configured for this cluster. So I want to include these specific tests that need to be run, and that are storage spaces direct, inventory, the network tests, of course, and the system configuration. Okie dokie. And that basically is all the tests that we need to include in our test validation cluster for now. So I'm just going to run this. This will probably take a couple of minutes or so, because even though that we have included only this 1, 2, 3, 4 tests, it still has to go through quite a few tests and validation configuration in this future cluster. So I'm going to leave this to finish, and we'll get back once it's done. Fast forwarding things, the tests have finished, and as you can see here, we have some warning messages. So no errors, but some warning messages, which again we can safely ignore. Now, basically, if we take a look through these warning messages, there are some about storage spaces direct, and it provides us with a report of failures, right? So if we want to check this report, it is saved on the local computer in this folder. So let me just quickly go there. Okay, and the file is called, let me just check one more time, validation report. So if we don't go back to V, it's the one with .16.htm. So this one, basically. Let me open this up. And I'm going to quickly show you why these warnings can be safely ignored. So if we go to storage spaces direct here, we can see that we have a failure, and that is the disk failure. So every disk basically shows up as fine, but we have some failures from disk that are, here you go, these are the 4 failures. So basically what this means is that this 4 disks, which were not actually recognized as let's say suitable for S2D, are the local disks, the local 4 disks on each of our virtual machines, so the C drive which hosts the operating system. So again, we can safely ignore this and get on to our next step here, and that is to actually create the cluster itself. So again, you could have done this in the GUI, but I want to show you the PowerShell way as well. So in order to create the cluster, we need to leverage the command let new cluster. We need to give it a name, and the name I'll give it will be S2D cluster. Just as simple as that. Okay, and we need to specify the nodes that we want to add to this cluster. So S2D1, S2D2, S2D3, and S2D4. Okay, we need to specify that we don't want to add any storage for now, as of yet. And we also need to give it a static IP address. So the static address I'm going to give it will be 192.168.3. Let's say 95. Okay, so now we are going to execute this command and start creating the cluster. This should basically finish much more quickly than the tests we have previously run. So we'll just leave it to run here for a little bit, and then we can go to the next step in our process, or as you will see, here we go, we created the cluster successfully, but we have a warning message. And as we know from the previous section, we can basically create a cluster, but this cluster is not yet configured or up for hosting roles on it. This warning message actually is about the quorum of the cluster because we have not specified or configured any quorum for this particular cluster. So the next step in our process will be to configure the quorum. As you know from the previous sections, we already have a share available on our server file 1, which actually hosts the quorum already for our cluster that we previously built. In fact, let me just browse to that location and quickly show you. So if we do file 1 slash quorum, we can see that here we go. These are the quorum files for our previous cluster. So we will leverage the same share to configure quorum on this cluster as well, because basically it would be in a different location. Now, again, in a production environment, you would not put the quorum configuration files on the same share for different clusters. So let's set up the quorum. So the commandlet is set cluster quorum, and we need to specify the cluster for which we want to set the quorum, and that is S2D cluster. And now we need to specify the type of quorum that we want to set, and that would be a file share witness in this particular location, file 1 slash quorum. And let's execute this. This is going to go very quick. And if we go back to our share, in fact, you can see that it actually places the quorum configuration files for this particular cluster in a separate set of folders and subfolders. Now, there are some additional configurations that we need to do for this particular cluster, basically to for consistency's sake, as well as we did with our previous cluster, and that is, let me just clear the screen here, to rename the networks appropriately. First of all, let's get the cluster network, and my cluster will be S2D cluster. And the name of the first network that I want to get is the default one, which gets created when you create the cluster, and that is cluster network 1. Here we go. This is the cluster network 1. And now, in order to rename this network using PowerShell, all we need to do is, from this set of parameters, just get the name of the cluster. So to do that, you need to put this in brackets. This is the shortest way to do it, dot name, and you will see that it will return only the string, the name of the network. Okay, and now to rename it, again, we need to set this equal to whatever name we want, but to give it a name just like we did with our other cluster, we are going to call this client network. Okay, dokie. And the other network that we currently have in this cluster is cluster network 2, and that would be our storage network. Okay, so we're done with the configuration so far in this cluster. And let me, in fact, just quickly show you. Let me just fire up failover cluster manager here. Here we go. To show you how the configuration that we've done so far looks in the GUI. So if we connect to a cluster, and our cluster would be, let's just browse for this, S2D cluster. I'm going to click OK here, and let me just quickly expand this. Let me show you that we have in our cluster the 4 nodes that we've added, and they're all up and running. The networks are the client network and the storage network, exactly like we named them in PowerShell. And one more thing I want to show you is that in this cluster so far, we don't have any disks available, any kind of storage, nor pools, nor enclosure. So I will see you in the next video where we'll be enabling storage spaces direct using PowerShell. I hope this has been informative for you, and thank you for watching.